My daughter-in-law dragged me to the bank and said, "Sign everything over to me. You're too old to handle money." I signed the papers quietly. But when the manager read them, he went pale and whispered, "Ma'am, are you sure?" My DIL smile froze when she heard what I'd actually signed. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I looked at the photograph of my husband, Gerald, on the mantelpiece. His smile was fixed in silver and wood. I placed my fingertips against the cool glass. "It's time," I whispered to his image. The doorbell rang then, not a chime, but a persistent, impatient buzz that vibrated through the quiet of my living room. I knew it was Serena before I opened the door, only she announced herself with that kind of aggressive sound. I took a breath, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked to the entryway. Through the frosted glass, I saw the blurred shape of her, sharp and angular. I opened the door. She stood there, a tight smile on her face, her eyes already scanning past me into the house. She was holding a leather folder. "Vivian, you took a while." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her perfume invaded the space, a cloying, floral scent that never suited the quiet smell of books and lemon polish in my home. I was starting to worry. "I was in the sitting room," I said, closing the door slowly. "I didn't hear it at first." "You really should get that hearing checked, Mom." She said the word Mom like it was a title she had to use, not a name she felt. "It's not safe being here alone if you can't hear the door." I followed her as she walked into the living room. She looked around, her gaze touching my armchair by the window, the shelves of books, the Afghan I had knitted years ago draped over the sofa. Her expression was one of faint distaste, as if viewing a museum exhibit of someone else's quaint life. "Sit, sit," she said, gesturing to the sofa as she took the wingback chair Gerald had always favored. She placed the leather folder on the coffee table between us. "We have things to discuss." I sat on the edge of the sofa, my hands folded in my lap. I kept my face soft, my eyes a little unfocused. It was a look I had practiced. It made people speak slowly to me. It made them reveal more than they intended. "Marcus and I have been so concerned," she began, leaning forward. She spoke in that clear, loud tone people use for the very young or the very old. "We know it's been hard since Gerald passed. All these bills, this big house. It's too much for you to manage." "I manage fine, Serena." "Of course you think you do," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "But we see the little things. The forgotten doctor's appointment last month, the confusion about the property tax bill. It's just too much stress for someone your age." I said nothing. I let the silence hang. She filled it as I knew she would. "We want to help, truly. It's our responsibility." She opened the folder. Inside were crisp, official-looking documents. I could see dense blocks of text from where I sat. "We've spoken to a lawyer, a good one. He's drawn everything up. It's very simple." "What is simple?" I asked, letting a note of wary confusion enter my voice. "We're going to take care of everything for you." She slid a single sheet from the stack. It was a summary letter. I saw words like power of attorney and asset management. "We'll handle all the finances, the house, your pension. You won't have to worry about a thing. You can just relax, enjoy your golden years." She made it sound like a gift, a burdensome gift I should be grateful to receive. "My pension is for my expenses," I said, keeping my tone mild, almost questioning. "And we'll use it for your expenses," she said, her voice dripping with false patience. "We'll pay the bills. We'll make sure you have what you need. It just makes more sense for it to be in an account we can access, so we can take care of things promptly. It's for your own good, Vivian, to protect you." I looked down at my hands. I thought of Gerald's photograph. I thought of 40 years of careful saving, of the pension I earned from 4 decades at the library, of the investments we had nurtured like a second garden. I thought of Serena's plans for a new kitchen, the European vacation she had mentioned to a friend on the phone last week, thinking I was napping in the next room. I don't know. I said softly, shaking my head a little. It seems like a lot. All these papers. Gerald always handled the papers. Her face lit up with a triumphant gleam. She had heard what she wanted to hear. Confirmation of my helplessness. That's exactly why we need to do this. You shouldn't have to struggle with things Gerald used to do. That's what family is for, to step in. She reached over and patted my hand. Her touch was cool and dry. Now I've made an appointment for us. Today, at the bank. Mr. Davidson is expecting us at 11. I let my eyes widen. The bank? Today? Yes, no sense in putting it off. We'll get everything signed and sorted in one go. Then it will all be over and you can stop worrying. She stood up, a clear signal the discussion was concluded. Go and get your purse. And your checkbook. Wear the blue coat. It looks nice. I rose slowly, my movements deliberate. I walked to the hallway closet. As I took my coat from the hanger, I glanced into the living room. Serena was standing by the mantel looking at Gerald's photograph. She did not touch it. She simply looked, and her face held no warmth, no memory. It was the look of an appraiser. I put on my coat. I took my small worn purse from the hook. I had already removed everything from it that morning except my identification and a single lipstick. All set? Serena asked, her voice bright and efficient. I suppose so, I murmured. She led the way out of my house, turning to make sure I locked the door. I fumbled with the key for a moment, adding to the picture she was constructing in her mind. The frail, confused old woman. We'll take my car, she said, heading for the sleek silver sedan parked at the curb. It looked alien on my street of older, sensible cars. I did not look back at my house as we drove away. I looked straight ahead, through the windshield. Serena talked as she drove, about streamlining, about efficiency, about how much easier my life would be. I nodded occasionally, making small, vague sounds of assent. Inside, my mind was still and cold. I thought of the papers waiting at the bank. I thought of the pen I would use. I thought of the look on Mr. Davidson's face when he saw what I had done. The plan was a quiet, solid weight in my chest. Serena saw a frail woman in the passenger seat. She did not see the librarian who had spent a lifetime learning how to find information, how to read the finest print, and how to catalog a betrayal with perfect, silent precision. The car moved forward with a smooth, expensive purr. The interior was cold, the air smelling of synthetic lemon and new leather. I adjusted the seatbelt across my chest, feeling its restraint. Serena adjusted the climate control with a sharp tap of her fingernail. You'll see, she said, merging into traffic. This is the best thing for everyone. It's just modernizing an outdated system. I looked out the window at the familiar streets passing by. The post office, the grocery store where I had shopped for 40 years, the library where I had worked. They were landmarks in a life she considered obsolete. Marcus agrees, you know, she continued, her eyes on the road. He's just so busy with work, he asked me to handle the details. He worries about you, but he knows I'm practical. I did not believe that. My son Marcus was not a cruel man. He was a distracted one, a man who found the emotional landscape of family messy and preferred the clean lines of spreadsheets. Serena provided those lines. She presented him with solutions, and he accepted them to avoid friction. I wondered what exact words she had used to frame this to him. Helping mom. Simplifying things. He would have nodded, relieved not to be involved. The house, for instance, Serena said. Her tone was conversational, as if discussing a magazine article. It's a solid property, but it's underutilized. That big backyard, the formal dining room you never use. We've been thinking, once everything is streamlined, we could do a major renovation. Open up the floor plan, modernize the kitchen completely. It would increase the equity so much. The kitchen, my kitchen, where Gerald and I had cooked Sunday breakfasts for Marcus when he was a boy, where I now made my tea and watched the morning light cross the table. She saw wasted square footage. I saw memory held in every scratched cabinet and sun-warmed tile. A renovation sounds like a lot of dust, I said softly, still looking out the window. Oh, We'd handle all of that. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. You could, I don't know, take a little trip to a senior residence for a few weeks. They have lovely programs." She waved a hand. "The point is, the value is just sitting there, dormant. It should be working for the family." The family, in her mouth, meant her, and Marcus, by extension. It did not mean me. I was becoming a problem the family's assets needed to work around. "And your pension," she said, and I could hear the real hunger enter her voice, thinly disguised as practicality. "Direct deposit into a joint management account is the obvious move. We can allocate it so much more efficiently than you receiving a lump sum. We can invest a portion, pay the property taxes and insurance from a dedicated fund. It's just smarter." "I use my pension for my expenses," I repeated, my voice deliberately faint. "And you will. We'll give you a monthly allowance, cash, for your little things, your books, your tea, whatever you need." The word allowance was a small, sharp knife. "It's safer that way, Vivian. Carrying too much cash or having a checkbook you might misplace. It's a target. This protects you." She was painting a picture of me as a creature of pure vulnerability, stumbling towards disaster without her intervention. It was her justification, and she was rehearsing it, smoothing the edges of the argument for herself as much as for me. "It's very kind of you," I murmured, feeding the narrative. "It's what family does," she said again, the mantra of her absolution. We stopped at a red light. She tapped her polished nails on the steering wheel. "Actually," she said, as if the thought had just occurred to her, "with the monthly outflow managed and the house equity accessed, it might even allow for a bit of a breather for Marcus and me. His bonus wasn't what we hoped this year. A little capital from the refinance could let us take that trip to Italy we've been postponing. You wouldn't begrudge us that, would you? After all our hard work?" There it was. The destination of my pension, my kitchen, my home. Not my care. A trip to Italy. I saw it clearly. Serena on a terrace in Tuscany, holding a glass of wine, toasting her own cleverness. She would use my money to buy a sun-drenched memory for herself, while she consigned me to a lovely program in a temporary residence. A coldness settled in my stomach, hard and precise. It was not anger anymore. Anger was a fire, and this was ice. It was clarity. The light turned green. The car moved forward. "Italy is far," I said. "That's the point," she laughed, a short, bright sound. "To get away, to live a little. You understand?" I did understand. I understood perfectly. She saw my life as concluded. The remaining assets were a carcass to be picked over, and she was the most deserving scavenger. My role was to be quietly, gratefully stripped. "Mr. Davidson is a good man," I said, changing the subject with an old woman's non sequitur. "He's a professional. He'll see the sense in the arrangement immediately." Her confidence was absolute. She had already decided how everyone would think and act. In her world, people were functions. Mr. Davidson's function was to facilitate. My function was to sign. We turned into the commercial part of town, the buildings growing taller, the glass shinier. The bank was ahead, a modest stone building among the glass boxes. Serena signaled and pulled into the underground parking garage. The sunlight vanished, replaced by the flat, fluorescent glare of concrete and steel. She shut off the engine. The sudden silence was heavy. She turned to me, her face arranging itself into an expression of gentle encouragement. It looked like a mask. "Now, just follow my lead in there. Okay, Vivian? It's all very straightforward. I'll do the talking. You just need to sign where Mr. Davidson indicates. Can you do that for me?" I met her eyes. I let mine look slightly watery, uncertain. I nodded slowly. "I can sign my name." Her smile was triumphant and utterly condescending. "Good. That's all you need to do." She gathered her leather folder and stepped out of the car. I opened my door. The air in the garage was cool and smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. I stood for a moment, my hand on the car's roof, feeling the solid metal beneath my palm. I thought of the pen in my purse. I thought of the specific looping flourish I used on official documents, a signature honed over a lifetime of checks and contracts. It was a skill she assumed I had lost. I closed the car door. The sound echoed in the cavernous space. Serena was already clicking toward the elevator, her heels sharp on the pavement. I followed at my own pace, the worn soles of my sensible shoes, making no sound at all. The trap was not around me. I was walking calmly, willingly into the center of it, ready to spring it shut from the inside. The cold clarity in my stomach was my compass. It was time. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The garage's concrete chill was replaced by the climate-controlled, odorless air of the bank lobby. Serena stepped out first, her posture straight, her eyes scanning the space as if taking ownership. I followed, allowing my shoulders to round slightly, my steps to become smaller and more uncertain on the polished marble floor. The lobby was a temple to quiet money. A high ceiling echoed with the subdued sounds of keyboards, murmured conversations, and the distant whir of a paper shredder. Potted ferns stood in corners, their leaves dust-free. Everything was clean, calm, and impersonal. It felt nothing like my home with its comfortable clutter and lived-in warmth. This was Serena's element, a place where things were processed, where value was transferred in silence. "This way," Serena said, not looking back, assuming I would trail behind. She walked directly to a mahogany reception desk where a young woman sat behind a computer. "Serena Pierce for Mr. Davidson. We have an 11 o'clock. The receptionist glanced at her screen, then smiled professionally. "Of course, he's expecting you. Go right through the second door on the left." "Thank you." Serena's acknowledgement was crisp. She turned and strode toward a corridor of offices with glass walls and wooden blinds. I followed, my gaze drifting over the people in cubicles, their heads bent over screens. No one looked up. We were invisible, another appointment in the day's schedule. Mr. Davidson's office door was open. He stood up from behind his desk as we appeared in the doorway. He was a man in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and a kind, lined face. He wore a dark blue suit. I had known him for 15 years, since Gerald and I first consolidated our accounts here. He had helped us through probate when Gerald passed. He always asked after my roses. "Mrs. Pierce?" he said, coming forward. His eyes went first to me, and he extended his hand. "Vivian, it's good to see you." His grip was firm, his gaze direct. There was a question in his eyes, a slight furrow in his brow as he took in my presence. "Hello, Robert," I said, using his first name as I always did. My voice was a little thready. I let my hand tremble slightly in his before withdrawing it. He then turned to Serena. "And you must be the daughter-in-law. Serena, is it?" "Yes, Serena Pierce." She shook his hand with a confident, brief motion. "Thank you for fitting us in on short notice." "Not at all. Please, both of you, have a seat." He gestured to the 2 leather chairs facing his desk. His office was neat. A framed photo of his family, a tidy stack of files, a computer monitor turned at an angle. On the wall was a generic painting of a sailboat. Serena sat first, placing her leather folder squarely on the edge of his desk. She crossed her legs. I lowered myself slowly into the other chair, placing my purse on my lap and clasping my hands over it. I kept my eyes downcast, looking at the pattern in the carpet. "So," Mr. Davidson said, settling back into his own chair. He steepled his fingers. "You indicated there were some estate planning documents to execute today?" "That's correct," Serena said, her voice smooth and efficient. She opened the folder. "As I mentioned on the phone, Vivian's husband passed some time ago, and the management of her affairs has become burdensome for her. We're here to simplify things, to ensure her assets are protected and properly managed for her care." Mr. Davidson nodded slowly. His eyes flicked to me. "I see. And you're comfortable with this, Vivian? You understand what we're doing today?" I looked up, meeting his gaze for a fraction of a second before letting mine slide away nervously toward Serena. I gave a small, hesitant nod. Serena says it's for the best. It's all so complicated now. It doesn't have to be complicated, Mr. Davidson said gently. We can go through everything step by step. There's no rush. Oh, we've been over it all thoroughly at home, Serena interjected, a note of pleasant firmness in her voice. She pulled out a sheaf of papers. Vivian understands the broad strokes. Today is really just about the formalities. We have a durable power of attorney here, giving Marcus and me authority over financial and healthcare decisions. And these are the transfer documents to move her accounts into a new joint management structure. She slid the papers across the desk toward him. He picked them up, his expression professionally neutral. He began to read, his eyes moving down the first page. I watched his face. I saw the exact moment his eyebrows drew together slightly. He turned a page, his lips pressed into a thin line. This is quite comprehensive, he said, his tone careful. It needs to be, Serena replied, to avoid any future confusion. Mr. Davidson looked at me again. This time his gaze was more intent. Vivian, these documents grant a very broad power. They would allow your son and daughter-in-law to manage your pension, your investments, your property. They could buy and sell assets on your behalf. Do you understand that? I twisted my hands in my lap. Serena explained it. They just want to help, so I don't make a mistake. I infused the words with a hint of shame, the fear of an old woman becoming a burden. It's a common safeguard for seniors, Serena added, her smile tight. A best practice. Now, if you could just confirm the account numbers and show us where she needs to sign, we can get this wrapped up. I'm sure you're very busy. Mr. Davidson did not look at her. He kept his eyes on me. Vivian, he said, his voice dropping to a softer, more personal register. Is this what you want? The room went very still. Serena's smile froze. I could feel her glare without seeing it. This was not following her script. The professional was supposed to facilitate, not interrogate. I looked at Mr. Davidson. I allowed a sheen of tears to fill my eyes, but I also let a flicker of something else pass through my gaze. A minute. Silent signal. It was not a look of panic, but one of deliberate communication. I saw his own eyes narrow just a fraction, a spark of recognition. He knew me. He knew I was not a woman who cried easily in banks. I dropped my gaze again, my voice a whisper. I just want to do what's right, for the family. It was the answer Serena wanted to hear. She let out a small, audible breath. There, you see? She said to Mr. Davidson, her tone regaining its confident clip. It's settled. Now, the signatures? Mr. Davidson looked from my downcast face to the papers in his hands. A conflict played out in the tightening of his jaw. Professional duty warred with personal unease. He had known Gerald. He had known me for 15 years. He saw Serena's impatience. He saw my apparent vulnerability. Finally, he gave a single, slow nod. It was a concession, but his posture remained stiff. Very well, he said, his voice returning to its formal banker's tone. I will need to witness the signatures, and I must go over the notarization process with you both. He reached for a pen from the holder on his desk, a heavy, silver-plated one. He placed it carefully on top of the documents. The stage was set. The performance could begin. The cold, clear feeling in my chest intensified. The first act was over. The second was about to start. Mr. Davidson's hand rested on the documents for a moment longer than necessary. The silence in the office was dense, broken only by the faint hum of the computer. He cleared his throat. As a witness and notary, my role is to confirm the identity of the signatory and ensure the signing is voluntary and informed, he began, his voice taking on a rote, procedural quality. He was speaking to the room, but his eyes kept finding mine. Vivian, you understand that by signing these documents, you are granting powers as described. You can choose to sign or not to sign. You can ask for more time to review. Do you understand? She understands, Serena said, the words quick and sharp. She leaned forward, her focus entirely on the papers. We've reviewed them. This is just the final step. Where does she need to sign, Robert? You can point to the lines. Mr. Davidson flinched almost imperceptibly at her use of his first name. He maintained his professional composure. He picked up the silver pen and pointed to a flagged line on the first document, the durable power of attorney. Here, on this line, and your initials here and here. His finger moved to several other spots. Just sign right where he's pointing, Vivian, Serena instructed, her voice adopting that sing-song tone of forced patience. She reached over and patted my knee. It's easy, just like signing a birthday card. I looked at the line. The text beside it was a dense block of legalize. I let my hand hover over the pen. It's a lot of papers, I murmured. It's just a few signatures, Serena countered, her smile strained. We're almost done. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, cold. I made my hand tremble slightly, a faint, unsteady vibration. I touched the tip to the paper, then pulled it back. My signature. It's not so good anymore. My hand gets stiff. It doesn't have to be perfect, Serena said, her voice tightening. Just make your mark. Mr. Davidson watched, his face a careful mask. Take your time, Vivian. I took a slow, shaky breath. This was the moment she had been pushing for, the moment of transfer, in her mind, the moment of victory. I needed her to be absolutely sure, to be utterly convinced of my capitulation. Any resistance now had to be the feeble, predictable resistance of a fading mind, not the strategy of an opponent. This one first? I asked, my voice small, pointing vaguely at the document. Yes, Mom. That one first. The mom was gritted out between her teeth. I lowered the pen again. I began to sign. I made the V a little too large, a little wobbly. I dragged the pen slowly with deliberate awkwardness, as if the act required immense concentration. The ink flowed smoothly, a dark blue line forming my name, Vivian Althea Pierce. I finished the final E with a small, unnecessary curl. It looked like the signature of someone whose control was slipping. Serena's body relaxed. She exhaled, a sound of pure satisfaction. She shot a glance at Mr. Davidson that was almost gloating. See? Simple. Good, Mr. Davidson said neutrally. Now the initials here, please. He pointed. I initialed where indicated, my movement slow but obedient. The power of attorney was done. Serena slid it aside, revealing the next document beneath it, the account transfer authorization. This was the one that would move the money. Her eyes glittered as she looked at it. And this one? I asked. This is the important one, Serena said, her voice dropping into a confiding tone that was meant to be reassuring, but was thick with greed. This lets us take care of all your bills and your pension for you. Just sign right there at the bottom. Mr. Davidson interjected. This document authorizes the transfer of all listed accounts, checking, savings, money market, and the brokerage account, into a new joint account. The listed accounts will be closed. The funds will be commingled. You understand that, Vivian? I blinked at him. Commingled? Mixed together, Serena snapped, her patience fraying. It's just a technical word. Sign, Vivian. I looked at the document. I saw the account numbers typed neatly. I saw the total balance column. It was a number that represented a lifetime of work, of frugality, of Gerald's careful planning, a number Serena saw as a down payment on a new life in Italy. It's a very big number, I whispered, more to myself than to them. It's your security, Serena said, her hand now on my shoulder, a grip that was meant to be supportive but felt like a restraint. And we're going to guard it for you. Now please sign. I nodded slowly, as if resigned. I picked up the pen again. My hand was steadier now, but I did not let that show. I placed the pen on the signature line. I could feel Serena's gaze burning into the side of my face. I could feel Mr. Davidson's watchful stillness. I signed. Again, the slow, careful script. Vivian A. Pierce. It matched the first signature closely enough, but with the same slight tremble in the downstroke. I initialed the other marked spots. I signed the next form and the next. Each signature was a performance of surrender. Each stroke of the pen was a piece of bait taken. Serena watched each one, her anticipation a physical presence in the room. When I put the pen down after the final signature, she could not contain a small, triumphant sound, a soft "there." She gathered the papers quickly, straightening them into a neat stack. She turned them around and pushed them back toward Mr. Davidson. "All done," she said, her voice bright with victory. "See? That wasn't so hard. Now, Robert, if you could just do your notary stamp and provide us with the copies. We'll need the originals for our records, of course." Mr. Davidson picked up the stack. He looked at the top page, at my last signature. He flipped through the others, his eyes scanning each signed line. His movements were slow, deliberate. He did not reach for his notary stamp. "I'll need to review these before notarization," he said, his voice oddly flat, "to ensure everything is in order." "What's to review?" Serena's laugh was short, dismissive. "She signed them. You witnessed it. It's straightforward." "Bank policy," he said, not looking at her. His eyes were on the papers, but his attention seemed elsewhere. He was pale. The professional mask was cracking, revealing a profound and growing disquiet. "It will just take a moment. Please excuse me." He stood up, the documents in his hand. He did not walk toward the door to seek a colleague or a copier. He simply stood behind his desk, his head bowed, reading. The room waited. Serena's confident smile began to solidify into something confused and brittle. My hands, folded in my lap, were perfectly still. The cold clarity inside me was now a focused point. The signing was over. The real transaction was about to begin. The silence stretched. Mr. Davidson stood behind his desk, motionless except for the slight movement of his eyes as they tracked across the pages. He turned one, then another. He went back to the first page I had signed, then to the last. His breathing, which had been inaudible, now seemed a little too measured, a little too controlled. Serena shifted in her chair. The leather creaked. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice slicing through the quiet. "They're standard forms. Everything should be in order." Mr. Davidson did not answer immediately. He slowly lowered himself back into his chair, the documents still in his hands. He placed them on the desk with a soft tap. He looked at me. His face had lost its professional neutrality. There was a pallor beneath his tan, a tightness around his mouth. His eyes held a question so profound it seemed to fill the room. "Vivian," he said. His voice was low, almost hoarse. "Ma'am, are you sure?" The question hung in the air. It was not the procedural query from earlier. This was different. It was personal, urgent, and layered with meaning. It was a man who had seen something he could not unsee, asking a woman he respected if she understood the magnitude of her own actions. I met his gaze. I did not look away. I did not let my eyes become watery or confused. I held his look steadily, and in that silent exchange, I conveyed everything. I saw the moment he understood. The tension in his shoulders did not ease, but its character changed. It was no longer the tension of dread, but of grim realization. "Of course she's sure," Serena said, her laugh brittle. "What kind of question is that? She just spent 10 minutes signing them. Robert, really, if there's a typo or something, just tell us. Otherwise, please proceed." Mr. Davidson ignored her. He kept his eyes locked on mine. "The signatures," he said, almost to himself. Then, louder, "You signed them all." "Yes," I said, my voice clear and firm for the first time that morning. It was a single syllable, but it cut through Serena's impatience. She turned to look at me, her brow furrowed. "Well, there you have it," Serena said, turning back to him, spreading her hands. "She confirms it. Now, the notary stamp?" Mr. Davidson finally broke his gaze from mine. He looked down at the papers. He picked up the top sheet again, the durable power of attorney. He studied my signature, the wobbly V, the deliberate curl on the E. Then he looked at the next document, and the next. "These are not the documents you presented for signing," he stated. It was not a question. It was a declaration, flat and absolute. Serena froze. "What are you talking about?" "Of course they are. Those are the papers from my folder." "The content of these pages," Mr. Davidson said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke to the facts, "does not match the descriptions you provided. The titles are similar. The formatting is nearly identical. But the text, the legal provisions are entirely different." "That's impossible," Serena snapped. She leaned forward, snatching the power of attorney document from his desk. She scanned it, her eyes darting back and forth. "This is the power of attorney. It says so right at the top. See? Durable power of attorney." Her finger stabbed at the heading. "Read the body of the document, Mrs. Pierce," Mr. Davidson said quietly. Serena's eyes dropped. She read silently for a few seconds. Her confident expression began to falter, replaced by confusion, then dawning horror. Her lips moved soundlessly. She flipped to the next page, the account transfer. She read. The color drained from her face. "What is this?" she whispered. Then louder. "What is this? These aren't the right forms. There's been a mistake." She looked at me, her eyes wide with panic and accusation. "What did you do? You brought the wrong papers." I said nothing. I simply watched her. The cold clarity inside me was now a quiet hum. "Vivian did not bring these papers," Mr. Davidson said. His tone was clinical now. "You did. You presented this folder. You took the documents out. You instructed her where to sign." "But they've been switched," Serena cried, her voice rising. "These aren't the ones. These are something else." "They appear to be legal instruments," Mr. Davidson said. He picked up the stack again, a series of sworn affidavits and a last will and testament. He looked at me. "Vivian, did you prepare these documents?" "I had them prepared," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. "By my attorney, Helen Wright. You know her, Robert. She has her office on Maple." He gave a slow, acknowledging nod. "I know Helen. She's excellent." "What? What affidavits? What will?" Serena was on her feet now, leaning over the desk, trying to grab the papers from him. Mr. Davidson did not relinquish them. He held them firmly. "Sit down, Mrs. Pierce," he said. And there was a new authority in his voice, an authority born of legal and ethical certainty. "You need to understand what has happened here today." Serena did not sit. She stood there, trembling, her perfectly composed world cracking apart. She looked from Mr. Davidson's grave face to my calm one. The realization was a physical blow. She took a step back. "You," she breathed, staring at me, "you planned this. You tricked me." I did not deny it. I adjusted the strap of my purse on my lap, a small, deliberate movement. The performance was over. The facade of the confused old woman fell away like a discarded coat. What remained was Vivian Pierce, retired librarian, widow, and strategist. I looked at my daughter-in-law, and for the first time I did not bother to hide the steel in my gaze. "You wanted me to sign papers, Serena," I said, my voice even and low. "So I signed them. You were very clear about where to put my name." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the suddenly frigid air of the office. "You just never asked me what the papers said." Serena stared at me, her mouth slightly open. The polished, imperious woman from the car ride was gone. In her place was someone raw and scrambling, her mind visibly churning as it tried to process the impossibility before her. The wrong papers, from her own folder. "That's not possible," she repeated, but the conviction was gone. It was a weak protest against the evidence sitting on the mahogany desk. Mr. Davidson cleared his throat, reclaiming control of the room. He had a banker's instinct for order, even in chaos. "Mrs. Pierce, please sit down. You need to hear this." She didn't want to sit. She wanted to lunge, to tear, to rewind the last hour. but the authority in his voice and the cold, unblinking certainty in my eyes seemed to root her to the spot. Slowly, stiffly, she lowered herself back into the leather chair. She looked shrunken. Mr. Davidson arranged the documents before him with precise movements. He picked up the first one, the one she had called the durable power of attorney. "This document," he began, his voice neutral and clear, "is titled Affidavit of Undue Influence and Attempted Financial Exploitation. It is a sworn statement, signed and notarized today, detailing a pattern of coercive behavior by one Serena Pierce toward the affiant, Vivian Pierce. It cites specific dates, conversations, and pressures applied to secure control of assets. It references today's appointment as the culmination of that pressure." He placed it down and picked up the next, the account transfer form. "This document is titled Revocation of Prior Beneficiary Designations and Notice of Intent. It formally nullifies any prior arrangements naming Marcus or Serena Pierce as beneficiaries on any accounts or policies. It directs all financial institutions to flag any future attempts by them to access Vivian Pierce's assets as potentially fraudulent." Serena made a small, choked sound. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair, knuckles white. He continued methodically. "The third document is a complaint of elder financial abuse, drafted for submission to Adult Protective Services and the State Attorney General's office. It is a formal allegation, with the signed affidavits attached as evidence." He saved the last document for the end. He lifted it. It was the thickest of the set. "This," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "is the last will and testament of Vivian Althea Pierce, dated and executed today, revoking all previous wills. It names Helen Wright, Esquire, as the executrix. It bequeaths the entirety of the estate, after the payment of debts and expenses, to the Silver Rose Trust, a charitable fund established for the benefit of low-income senior women in this county. The trust paperwork is appended. The bequest is explicit and unconditional." He laid the will down gently on top of the small pile. The finality of the gesture was like a stone dropping. The room was silent. The hum of the air conditioning seemed loud. Serena was not looking at him anymore. She was staring at the surface of the desk, her breathing shallow. The information was too much, too fast. Her plan had not just failed, it had been turned inside out and used as a weapon against her. Mr. Davidson looked at me. "The notarization I provide today will authenticate these signatures, making these documents legally actionable and binding. The will, in particular, is now irrevocable, without a lengthy and difficult legal challenge." He paused. "Do you wish me to proceed, Vivian?" He was giving me one last chance to back out, a final courtesy. I appreciated it, but I had come too far, and the path was too clear. "Yes, Robert," I said. "Please proceed." He gave a single solemn nod. He reached into his desk drawer and retrieved his notary seal and journal. He opened the journal, recorded the date, the type of documents, and my name. His movements were deliberate, ritualistic. He stamped each document with a firm, sharp thump of the seal, then signed and dated next to it. Each thump was a nail in the coffin of Serena's ambitions. As he worked, Serena seemed to awaken from her stupor. The shock was hardening into rage. She turned that rage on him. "You're in on this," she hissed. "This is collusion. You helped her switch the papers." Mr. Davidson did not look up from his task. "I did not. The documents were presented by you. I witnessed the signing at your insistence. My role is to notarize the signatures on the documents presented. That is what I am doing." His tone was icy, professional, and utterly impenetrable. He was following the letter of the law, and it was a fortress. "But they're lies!" she cried, her voice breaking. "All of it! She's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing." At this, Mr. Davidson did look up. His eyes were like flint. "Mrs. Pierce, I have known Vivian Pierce for 15 years. I have handled her financial affairs since her husband's passing. She has never missed a statement, never made an impulsive transfer, never exhibited any confusion in her financial dealings. The Vivian Pierce, who sat in this chair today and asked me if I knew her attorney on Maple Street, was not confused. She was executing a plan. He finished stamping the last document, the will. He closed his notary journal with a definitive snap. He gathered the now official papers into a neat stack and slid them across the desk toward me. "These are your originals, Vivian. I will scan copies for the bank's file. As a matter of record, I am legally obligated to inform you that certain documents, namely the complaint of elder abuse, may trigger external reporting requirements." "I understand," I said. I took the papers. They felt warm from his hands. They felt like freedom. Serena watched the stack move toward me. She watched as I opened my purse. Not the worn one I'd brought as part of my act, but a larger, sturdier bag I had packed this morning and left in the lobby with the receptionist, whom I had tipped $20 to hold for me. I placed the documents inside, next to a sealed envelope addressed to my attorney, Helen Wright. The reality was now physical. The evidence was in my possession. Her leverage was gone, replaced by a mountain of legal liability. The color that had drained from her face earlier returned in 2 ugly red spots high on her cheeks. Her eyes, wide and frantic, fixed on me. "You vicious old bitch," she whispered, the words trembling with venom. "You've ruined everything." I looked at her then, truly looked at her, for the first time since we had entered this room. I saw the greed, the entitlement, the shocking lack of empathy. I saw the woman who had looked at my home and seen a renovation project, at my life and seen an inconvenience. The cold clarity in me did not waver. It solidified. "No, Serena," I said, my voice quiet but clear in the hushed office. "You did that all by yourself. I just made sure there was a record of it." Serena's insult hung in the air, but its power was gone. It was the last feeble weapon of someone who had lost the real battle. She seemed to realize this immediately because her face crumpled from rage into something closer to panic. She turned back to Mr. Davidson, her hands outstretched in a pleading gesture that was entirely new for her. "You can't accept these," she said, her voice strained. "They're fraudulent. She tricked me. She must have switched the papers in my folder when I wasn't looking." Mr. Davidson's expression remained impassive. "The folder never left your possession in this office, Mrs. Pierce. You carried it in. You opened it. You presented the documents. I witnessed it. The notarization is valid." "But the content," she nearly shrieked, her composure shattering. "They're not what I brought. They're filled with lies, accusations. The content is a matter for the relevant authorities and, potentially, the courts to evaluate," he replied, his voice a model of bureaucratic calm. "My role pertains to the execution of the signatures. However, given the nature of the documents, I am required to inform you of their general substance, as they directly involve you." He picked up the first affidavit again. "This sworn statement alleges that you, over the past several months, engaged in a deliberate campaign to isolate Vivian Pierce and gain control of her finances. It cites multiple instances where you referred to her as burdensome, discussed placing her in a senior residence, and belittled her ability to manage her own affairs. It notes your repeated attempts to gain access to her bank statements and the title to her home." Serena shook her head, a frantic back-and-forth motion. "No, that's just me being concerned. I was worried about her." "The affidavit interprets it differently," Mr. Davidson continued, unmoved. "It characterizes your offer to manage her pension as an attempt at appropriation, especially in light of your stated plans to use home equity for personal travel. The statement you made in the car today about Italy is referenced." Her eyes widened. She shot a look of pure hatred at me. "You were listening. You were pretending to be half asleep, and you were listening." I said nothing. I didn't need to. Mr. Davidson moved to the next document. The revocation of beneficiary designations is self-explanatory and legally sound. The complaint to Adult Protective Services is a formalized version of the affidavit, requesting an investigation into suspected financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. As a bank manager, I am a mandatory reporter. The filing of this document, which now bears my notary seal, creates an obligation for me to submit a report to the state. The color drained from Serena's face once more. This was no longer about money. This was about her reputation, her freedom. "An investigation?" she whispered. "That is the typical procedure," he confirmed. His tone was not unkind, but it was utterly without mercy. He was simply stating facts. "The final document is the will. Its terms are unequivocal. All prior wills are revoked. The entirety of Vivian Pierce's estate is bequeathed to a charitable trust. No provisions are made for Marcus Pierce, or for you." He let that settle. The finality of it was absolute. No Italian vacation, no renovated kitchen, no monthly allowance from her pension. Instead, a legal nightmare and public shame. Serena seemed to collapse inward. Her shoulders slumped. She stared at the desktop, her mind racing through the implications. I could almost see the calculations behind her eyes. The fight with Marcus, the explanations to friends, the possibility of a court case, the stain on her name. The sleek, modern life she had built was cracking at the foundations. "She can't do this," Serena muttered, more to herself than to us. "Marcus won't allow it. He's her son. He has rights." "Marcus has the rights Vivian chooses to give him," I said, speaking for the first time since her insult. My voice was quiet but carried easily in the silent room. "And I have chosen to give them to women who actually need help, not to those who try to steal it." She looked up at me, and for a fleeting second I saw something beyond the anger and panic. I saw a glimmer of genuine confusion, as if she truly could not comprehend how this had happened. "You set a trap for me," she said, her voice hollow. "I protected myself from you," I corrected. "The trap was your own greed. You were so busy making plans for my money, you never stopped to wonder if I was making plans of my own. You saw an old lady. You didn't see a person." Mr. Davidson shifted slightly in his chair. The professional part of his duty was complete. The human part seemed to urge him to conclude this painful scene. "Mrs. Pierce," he said to Serena, "I must advise you that any further direct contact with Vivian regarding her finances, or any attempts to challenge these documents through coercion or threat, would constitute additional evidence for the existing complaint. It would be seen as retaliatory." It was a warning, a stark, clear warning from an officer of the institution. She was not just defeated, she was cordoned off legally and professionally. Serena looked from him to me and back again. The reality was closing in, a cage of her own making. She had walked in here believing she was about to secure her future. She was leaving with that future in ruins, and a fight ahead that she was ill-equipped to win. The polished, commanding woman was gone. What remained was a shocked, frightened woman facing the consequences of her own arrogance. She stood up. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated. She did not look at me again. She turned and walked stiffly to the office door, opened it, and left without a word. The click of the latch behind her was a soft, definitive sound. Mr. Davidson and I were alone. The tension in the room seeped away, replaced by a heavy quiet. He let out a long, slow breath and ran a hand over his face. "Vivian," he said. My God. I placed the documents carefully into my bag and fastened the clasp. The deed was done. The vengeance, cold and precise, was complete. I looked at him, and for the first time that day, I allowed a small, tired smile to touch my lips. "Thank you, Robert, for doing your job." He shook his head, a look of profound respect in his eyes. I've never seen anything like that. I was genuinely afraid for you when you started signing. "I know," I said. That was the point. I stood up, smoothing my dress. The performance was over. All that was left was to go home. The door clicked shut, sealing Serena's exit. For a moment, the only sound in Mr. Davidson's office was the steady hum of the computer and the distant, muffled sounds of the bank lobby. He leaned back in his chair, the leather sighing under his weight, and looked at me with an expression that blended awe, concern, and residual shock. "I need a moment to process that," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "I've seen attempted fraud before. I've even stopped a few. But I have never seen a counter-maneuver of that precision. You had those documents ready. You knew she would bring you here." "I suspected," I corrected, my voice returning to its normal, measured tone. The act was fully retired now. The pressure had been building for months. The comments about my hearing, my memory, the house being too much, then the sudden urgency about helping with my finances. It was a familiar pattern. I've read about it. I've seen it happen to others. I paused. When she mentioned Italy in my kitchen 2 weeks ago, I knew the timeline had accelerated. That's when I called Helen. "Your attorney?" "Yes." I explained the situation. She was furious. She helped me draft the affidavits and the complaint. The will was my idea. Gerald and I had always planned to leave something to Marcus, but circumstances change. Helen set up the charitable trust. The Silver Rose was Gerald's nickname for me. I said this matter-of-factly. There was no tremor in my voice. "And the document switch?" he asked, his professional curiosity overriding his dismay. "That was simpler than it seemed," I said. "Serena brought her folder to my house 3 days ago to review the papers with me. She left it on my coffee table while she used the bathroom. That was all the time I needed. I had my prepared documents in a matching folder in the kitchen. A simple exchange. She never checked. She assumed the contents were hers to control." Mr. Davidson let out a low whistle. "She walked in here today carrying her own condemnation." "She did," I agreed. "And you played your part perfectly, Robert. Your hesitation, your questions. They sold the performance. She believed right up until the end that she was in control." He had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "I wasn't performing at first, Vivian. I was genuinely appalled. I still am. What she was attempting, it was monstrous." "It was," I said. The word felt clean and accurate. "But it's over now. The documents are executed. Helen has the originals of everything, by the way. These are copies. I'll drop this envelope in the mail to her on my way home." I patted my bag. "What happens now? With Serena? With Marcus?" he asked. "That is no longer my concern," I said, standing up. My joints protested slightly after sitting so tense for so long, but I felt a lightness, a freedom in the movement. "My son will have to grapple with the wife he chose. He will have to read the affidavits. He will have to decide if the woman who tried to bankrupt and disgrace his mother is the partner he wants. That is his journey, not mine." I looked around the office, at the sailboat painting, the family photo, the tidy desk. This chapter of my life was closing here, in this sterile, polite room. As for the legal aspects, Helen will handle the filing with Adult Protective Services. Your report will corroborate it. There will likely be an investigation. It will be unpleasant for them. That is a consequence, not my goal. "What was your goal, Vivian?" he asked softly. I fastened the buttons on my coat. I picked up my purse, feeling the satisfying weight of the documents within. To protect what is mine. To ensure my final years are on my terms. To show that this old lady is not a resource to be harvested. I met his gaze, and to sleep peacefully at night, which I will, starting tonight. He stood as well, coming around the desk. "You are remarkable." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I am simply a woman who paid attention. Thank you for your time, Robert, and for your discretion." "Of course." He walked me to the door of his office. He did not offer to shake my hand again, but gave a respectful nod. "Take care of yourself, Vivian." I stepped out into the corridor. The bank lobby seemed brighter, the sounds more distinct. I walked past the cubicles, past the teller windows, my heels making soft, confident taps on the marble. I was aware of looks from the staff, curious, perhaps remembering the distressed older woman who had come in with the aggressive younger one. They saw a different woman leaving, back straight, head high, a composed certainty in her step. I approached the reception desk. The young woman who had taken my bag earlier looked up. "All finished, Mrs. Pierce," she asked pleasantly. "All finished," I confirmed. "Thank you for your help." I handed her the sealed envelope addressed to Helen Wright. "Could you ensure this goes out with today's mail?" "Absolutely." She took it and placed it in an outgoing mail tray. I walked to the main doors. They slid open automatically, releasing me into the midday sun. The air outside was cooler now, fresher. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. I did not look for Serena's silver car. I did not care where she had gone. I turned left and began the walk to the post office, 2 blocks away. I needed stamps for a few other letters, one to the chair of the library board about a donation in Gerald's name, another to my friend Cora, suggesting a lunch date. Ordinary tasks, the fabric of a life I had just fiercely reclaimed. As I walked, the cold, sharp clarity that had sustained me for weeks began to soften, to warm. It was not replaced by joy, but by a profound and solid peace. The battle was over. I had used the weapons I had: patience, observation, paperwork, and the quiet, unassuming intelligence that Serena had so fatally mistaken for weakness. The vengeance was not loud or violent. It was administrative, legal, and absolute. And it was mine. The walk home from the post office was quiet. The neighborhood was steeped in the calm of a weekday afternoon. I passed houses with trimmed lawns, children's bicycles left on driveways, the occasional curtain twitching. It was a world of ordinary concerns, and I was glad to re-enter it. My own house came into view, its familiar lines a welcome sight. The lock turned with a solid click, and I was inside. The silence of my home was different now. It was not the tense silence of waiting for the next patronizing visit or the next financial suggestion. It was a deep, clean quiet. I hung my coat in the closet and placed my purse on the hall table. I went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the stove. The simple, automatic action was a balm. The telephone rang just as the kettle began to whistle. I turned off the burner and picked up the receiver. It was Helen Wright, my attorney. "Vivian, I received your envelope by courier. The bank messenger dropped it off." Her voice was brisk, professional, but I could hear the underlying satisfaction. "Everything is in order. The notarization is flawless. I've already initiated the filing with Adult Protective Services. The complaint and affidavits are on their way to the county office as we speak." "Thank you, Helen." Davidson called me as well. He's submitting his mandatory report this afternoon. He was impressively detailed. His testimony will carry significant weight. She paused. "You should be prepared for some fallout, Vivian. Marcus will likely contact you. There may be pressure from other family members if Serena enlists them." "I am prepared," I said. "My position is clear. The documents speak for themselves. They do, and they speak loudly." I could hear the rustle of papers on her desk. The will is now irrevocable, without a prolonged and expensive contest, which I will vigorously defend. Given the evidence of attempted exploitation, no court will look favorably on such a challenge. I've also placed a formal alert on all your financial accounts, requiring dual authorization from you and me for any significant changes. It's a standard protective measure in these cases. I appreciate that. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly. "I am feeling at peace," I answered truthfully. "The matter is out of my hands and into the proper channels." "Good. That's exactly where it should be. I'll handle everything from here. You just live your life. Call me if anyone bothers you." I thanked her again and hung up. The kettle had cooled slightly. I reheated the water and made a pot of Earl Grey. I carried it to the living room on a tray with a single cup and saucer. I sat in my armchair by the window. The afternoon sun slanted across the rug. The telephone rang again an hour later. This time it was Marcus. His voice was strained, a mixture of confusion and anger. "Mom, what is going on? Serena came home in a state. She's saying you've accused her of some kind of fraud, that you've cut us out of your will. She's talking about lawyers." I took a slow sip of my tea before responding. "Serena brought me to the bank today to sign over control of all my assets to the two of you. She presented me with power of attorney and transfer documents. She told me it was for my own good." "She was trying to help," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. He had heard this line before from her. "She told me in the car that she planned to use the equity from this house to pay for a trip to Italy," I continued, my voice level. "She described my pension as inefficient and said she would give me a cash allowance. She spoke to me as if I were a child or an idiot. This was not help, Marcus. It was a calculated takeover." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could imagine his mind working, piecing together her behavior over the past months with the cold facts I was presenting. The documents she brought. He began weakly. "Were not the documents I signed," I finished for him. "I signed affidavits describing her actions, a formal complaint of elder financial abuse, and a new will. Mr. Davidson notarized them. They have been filed with the appropriate authorities. Your wife is the subject of an official investigation, Marcus. That is the situation." His breath hitched. "An investigation? Mom, that's extreme. Can't we talk about this? Work it out as a family?" The time for family discussion was before she scheduled a bank appointment to legally strip me of my autonomy, I said. "She did not consult you, I suspect, on the specifics. She told you she was helping Mom. Now you know what that help entailed. You can read the affidavits. Helen Wright can provide you with copies." "You've turned this into a legal war," he cried, his frustration boiling over. "No," I corrected him, my tone finally gaining an edge. "Serena started a war. I simply chose the battlefield, and I fortified my position. The consequences she faces are the direct result of her own actions. You need to understand that. I am not the villain here. I am the person who was attacked and who defended herself. Thoroughly." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, defeated. "What am I supposed to do now?" "That is for you to decide," I said. "My relationship with you is separate from this. You are my son. But my finances, my home, and my legacy are no longer topics for discussion. They are settled. If you wish to see me, you may visit, alone. We will not speak of Serena or of money. Those are my terms." He did not reply for a moment. Then he said, "I need to think. I need to talk to Serena." "I'm sure you do," I said. "Goodbye, Marcus." I placed the receiver back in its cradle. My hand was steady. The conversation had been necessary, and it was done. I felt no triumph, only a firm resolution. I had drawn a line. It was up to him to decide which side of it he wanted to stand on. I finished my tea as the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the room. The house was utterly still, but the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the quiet certainty of safety, of a threat that had been identified, countered, and neutralized. The machinery of the law was now in motion, and it would grind through its processes without any further effort from me. My part was over. All that remained was to wait and to live. I picked up my book from the side table, found my page, and began to read. The words, for the first time in months, held my full attention. The next morning arrived without fanfare. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains in my bedroom, casting familiar patterns on the wall. I rose, dressed, and went through my morning routine. The house held its usual sounds, the creak of the floorboard near the kitchen sink, the hum of the refrigerator, but the oppressive weight that had lingered for months was gone. The air felt lighter. After breakfast, I went to the living room. I stood before the mantelpiece and looked at Gerald's photograph. I picked up the simple silver frame. His smile, captured forever, seemed to hold a knowing warmth. I had spoken to him before this began, and now I felt I could report a conclusion. "It's done," I said quietly to his image. "It's all secured. The house, the pension, everything. It will go to the trust, just as we discussed when things changed." I did not say more. He would have understood the necessity. He had always been a practical man and a fiercely protective one. I placed the frame back exactly in its center, my fingers brushing the glass clean of a speck of dust. The telephone rang mid-morning. It was Cora, my friend from the library board and my bridge partner for 20 years. "Vivian, dear, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" Her voice was rich with genuine concern. The community grapevine worked efficiently. She would have heard whispers of a dramatic incident at the bank, of Serena's abrupt departure from various committees. Cora was too polite to ask directly, but her question was pointed. "I am perfectly well, Cora. Better than I've been in some time, actually." "I'm glad to hear it," she said, and I could hear the relief in her tone. She was a good friend. "Listen, a group of us are going to the community center for bingo tonight. Martha, Jean, and a few others. We could use a sharp eye. What do you say? It would do you good to get out." I did not hesitate. "I would like that very much. What time?" 7 o'clock. We'll meet in the lobby. I'll drive." "I'll be ready," I said. We chatted for a few more minutes about inconsequential things. A new novel at the library, the unseasonably cool spring. It was normal. It was life resuming its natural course. When I hung up, I felt a simple, uncomplicated pleasure. An evening out with friends. A trivial, lovely thing. I spent the afternoon in my garden. It was a small patch behind the house, but it was mine. I weeded the flower beds where the first shoots of my roses were beginning to show. I checked the soil, made a mental note to buy fertilizer. The physical work was satisfying, the results tangible and quiet. Later, I went to my desk in the small den. I wrote a check for my monthly donation to the local food bank, as I always did. I balanced my checkbook, the columns of numbers neat and predictable under my pen. My accounts were mine alone, monitored but untouched by outside hands. The alert Helen had placed was a silent sentinel, a technical formality that gave me additional peace. As evening approached, I prepared for my night out. I chose a comfortable dress and a light cardigan. I put on a pair of simple earrings. I looked at myself in the mirror. My silver gray hair was neat. My eyes, which Serena had thought were foggy with age, were clear. They reflected a woman who had faced a threat and dismantled it with precision. Cora arrived promptly at 6:45. Her car was a sensible sedan, much like my old one. She greeted me with a warm smile and a squeeze of my hand that said more than words. We drove to the community center, talking of easy things. The center was brightly lit, bustling with people. The air smelled of coffee and floor polish. We found our group at a long table already set with bingo cards and markers. There was Martha, who had been a teacher, and Jean, who ran the local bookstore. They greeted me with normalcy, with kindness, and without pity. They were women of my generation, who understood the value of dignity and the quiet wars one sometimes had to fight. We played. The caller's voice was a steady drone. I focused on my cards, the simple pleasure of scanning rows of numbers. When I got a bingo on the third game, a straight line down the middle, I called it out clearly. There was a small chorus of congratulations. I won a $10 gift certificate to the grocery store. We all laughed. It was a small victory, meaningless in the grand scheme, but it felt good. It felt like a piece of a normal, happy life. Cora drove me home. We said our goodbyes at the curb, with plans for lunch the following week. I let myself into my house. It was dark and quiet waiting for me. I turned on a single lamp in the living room, its glow soft and welcoming. I made a cup of chamomile tea. I carried it to my armchair. I did not pick up a book. I simply sat sipping the warm liquid, listening to the silence of my own secure space. The vengeance was complete. It had been exact, legal and final. It had not brought shouting or violence. It had brought silence, the silence of a threat removed, of a balance restored. My pension was mine. My house was mine. My future was mine to shape, right up to the very end, after which it would become a shelter for other women who might need it. I looked across the room at Gerald's photograph, illuminated by the lamplight. I smiled. It was a small, private smile of satisfaction and of peace. The story was over. My life, my real life, was back in my own hands. I finished my tea, turned off the light, and went upstairs to bed. I slept deeply and without a single dream.